Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Christy. Today's video is something a little different than what I normally do. I do have a degree in psychology, so I thought it would be interesting to see how the Discovery University's version of the psychology degree differs from what I had when I was in college for it. This is my sim self. I use her for pretty much all my little experiments. Poor little thing. I did cheat her skills up to make sure she got into the distinguished degree at Foxbury for psychology. So she is getting ready to start her first term. My sim self is a light sleeper, so I actually cheated her needs down to make sure she slept. So I'm going to have her get up. I'm not going to be showing the entire Let's Play of her. I'm just going to complete the terms off camera and then come back and discuss her next term classes. So I'm going to have her come work on this for right now while we discuss her first term classes. So for her first term, she has, the psychology degree states it. Psychology considers one of the core questions of existence. Why do we do what we do? And unpacks in an academic setting. Boosts skills such as charisma, logic, and research and debate, all while unlocking the mysteries of the mind. I can say that you do use a lot of logic, research, and debate when studying psychology. Charisma, I didn't use so much, but you know. So class number 1 is Thanky Roots Psychology 1. The skill is research and debate. That's the presentation she's working on right now. All students will begin with the Psychology 1 class, which will provide an education on the roots of this behavior-centered science. Students will trace psychology from early philosophical thought exercises through to modern experimental research. That's pretty much what I did in Psychology 1. We did learn just the basics from the beginning of psychology until the current time. Voting is now closed. Free love received the most votes. Yay. Okay, I really wouldn't suggest taking this next class at the same time you're taking the first one, but whatever. The Legacy of the Brain, Psychology 2. The skill is research and debate. So, with every new era of brain research, 2 questions seem to open up for every answer. This course uses a timeline of neuroscience to teach the evolution of knowledge we've gained on the brain and how this research may be used for understanding most of modern psychology theory and how shortcomings of historical theory. I really wouldn't say that's what I took in psychology too, but I did take a class close to that. Okay, so this is her poor quality presentation. I don't care if you see my name because that's not my real last name. So, okay, so we have a picture of her brain, which pretty self-explanatory in psychology. I'm not sure if she's maybe studying somebody through time. So we're going to have her work on that. We're going to have her refine and organize more and see how the next level of project looks. But back to this class, you do learn about how research has developed over time, and you've learned to do things and answered questions maybe a little differently than you did before. The third class is The Brain as a Machine, and the skill is logic. This course applies some fairly recent advances in computational complexity into modeling the brain as a programmable learning machine. Students will map physical regions of the brain to various learning algorithms and will need to handle cases where the biological brain is too mysterious or complex to capture digitally. You do study that the brain is a very complex machine in your body. Okay, so her project's starting to look a little bit better. Still concerned about the knife on the side. Perhaps she is studying a serial killer. I mean, I did have to write a paper proving once that Saddam Hussein was a narcissist, which was fairly simple to do. So, yeah, I mean, you do study the physical regions of the brain, you learn everything that each region of the brain controls. And okay, her last class this term is beginning neuropsychology. Skill is logic. So, for students who can't get enough of the biological brain, this course bridges the physical with the psychological by exploring the ways in which physical changes or injuries to the brain may affect decision making and mental motivation afterwards. I didn't study neuropsychology that much because it really wasn't. Okay, so we'll get back to neuropsychology in a minute. Her excellent term presentation is a little bit better. These are the ink blot photos they show you. And we got a picture of, I guess it's supposed to be somebody in therapy. The normal, stereotypical patient sitting on the sofa, therapist sitting in the chair. This picture got even creepier than the knife picture. I think I would have preferred the knife picture at this point. And that middle picture that she's standing in front of, I've seen 1,000,001 times in textbooks. It's like one of the most common psychology pictures. Okay, that looks like a voodoo doll. I'm not sure how that plays into psychology. Okay, can she do anything else? She can refine and organize a little bit more. Okay. Girl, you are going to get an A in this class. Get a moving. But I didn't say neuropsychology as much because it really wasn't what I was going into. I either wanted to be a sports psychologist or a forensic psychologist. And while in forensic psychology and sports psychology, I did need to know some neuropsychology, it wasn't like a big class that I had to take. All right, I do have her living in Brightchester, whatever the world is that came with Discovery University. There was an empty house. I tore that down and put this random one I built in Oasis Springs down. So it looks completely out of place, but okay. So did she finish? Get back in here, girl. Okay, her first term grades are in, and she got A pluses in everything. So let's register for her second term. So we'll stay at home. We're going to pay with household funds. Okay, so her classes are Pondering Personalities. Skill is Charisma. Using personality as a strong part of identity, this class examines the ways in which our sense of self affect our view of the world. Certain extreme and archetypal, what? Okay, I know what it means, but never seen it written that way. Personality types are described and categorized as students look at the various behaviors attributed to each one, fairly or unfairly as the case may be. aka personality psychology, personality psychology, which I took. It was really big if you're going to go into industrial organizational psychology, which is where you work for companies and stuff like that. Social networks online and off, skill charisma. With the advent of an always connected society and social communities that live online, psychological science must evolve to understand how to talk about, diagnose, and build mental wellness in this new era. Um, Sounds kind of interesting. I don't think it's really anything that I took, more or less, but that class does sound interesting. Mental decision trees, skill, logic. One of the great tools for modern machine learning depends on creating large, complex decision trees. This course examines these computational structures and applies them to decisions we make without machines, analyzing how well these trees model the way our minds actually work. Um, well, I mean, we touched on decision trees, but we didn't have a whole class dedicated to it. I'm not really sure I would want to take a whole class dedicated to decision trees. Off track, the trolley problem. Skill logic. The classic trolley problem is about being forced to decide to make a moral decision through a seemingly logical lens. This course uses this classic conundrum to explore the intersection of logic and emotion. Interesting. Do we have any presentations to do? We do. Why not? Okay, so I'm going to have her work on that real quick. Okay. How's this project going to look? What class is this anyway? Pondering personalities. Okay. Alright, looks the same as the last one did. Has a knife, the brain. This one has a different picture in the middle. Interesting. I guess that's supposed to depict the different personalities. Okay. Same stuff, different layout. Okay, don't ask about what's going on in the background. You do not want to know at this point. The final grades were A plus, A plus, A plus, and A minus, and she still has A plus GPA, and she will be getting ready to start her final term because she had to have 12 classes, I believe, and she's already taken 8. So this should be her last term. Okay, so 4 classes at home. Okay. Well, Lilith's stuff is not going to tell us anything. So these last classes are going to be Talking the Talk, Advanced Negotiation. It can be difficult enough to understand how a single mind may work, so throwing a second mind in there raises the ambiguity quite a bit. Every negotiation includes two minds that fluctuate between opposition and agreement. This class attempts to understand the motivations and decision factors that can occur in these tense and changing settings. I never took a single class about negotiation. I took motivational psychology, but not anything dealing with negotiation. Win, lose, or non-zero sum. When in a debate, negotiation, or other professional argument, it can often seem like the outcome will result in a winner and a loser. This course explores how expanding the mental model of competition to be non-zero sum has profound implications for how we mentally approach such discussions and even for how well we feel afterwards. I don't even know what class that would be equivalent to in the real world. The feel world. All of us use words to describe the emotions we feel throughout the day, but the ways in which we experience emotions may be completely different from one another. Students will examine the science behind what our minds are doing when we say that we feel a certain way and attempt to get their bodies to respond differently to the same emotion. That sounds like emotional psychology, which I believe I took. That sounds awfully familiar. And I know we talked a lot about emotional psychology, and I feel like one of my earlier classes was emotional psychology. At the end of this, I am going to be discussing or listing all the classes that I did take besides my core classes, which is like the English and maths and all that stuff. And a marvelous Mr. Maslow. Using the theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, students will go through a thought experiment of imagining virtual versions of themselves with simpler motivations that directly follow the hierarchy. Would these little beings behave similarly enough that they'd be indistinguishable? Would there be any obvious differences in the decision-making capacity between these beings and the students themselves? Roger Maslow's hierarchy of needs is very, very interesting. And I kind of wish we had at least a half semester class just on that. In fact, I think I wrote a paper about it for extra credit, believe it or not. It's like we could write a paper and it would replace our lowest test grade. And I wrote a paper on his hierarchy of needs. It's really interesting, and if you ever have a chance to look it up, look it up. But yeah, I wish we had a class just on that. Okay, so those are her final classes. So yeah, I'm going to list the classes that I did take for my psychology degree and compare and see which ones of these would even closely relate to the ones that I actually took. Okay, so when I went back to college, I was going back for accounting. I was pretty far into my accounting classes when I took the Principles of Psychology class as my social science elective, and I got fascinated by psychology. So I dropped accounting and started psychology. Now, the Intro to Drug Use and Abuse and AIDS Awareness were two that I took just because I figured that they would help me out in like counseling and things like that. And then I took Principles of Psychology, Psychology 1, Psychology 2, Child Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, and Psychology of Marriage. I did all of that through my community college. And that Psychology of Marriage is a very fascinating class. And I wish that they had offered it probably at bigger colleges. I mean, they might, I don't know, but never really heard of many people that have taken that. So then when I started my actual bachelor's program, I took general psychology, which would be the same as the Sims Psychology 1. I took history and systems in psychology, which is the same as what the legacy of the brain Psychology 2 was, or as it was described in their little. I took statistical reasoning in psychology, biological foundations in psychology, and if you notice, I put the little plumb bobs next to the classes that reference back to what the Sims had in their program. So biological foundations in psychology was the same as the brain as a machine. Motivational processes in human psychology was the same as their talking the talk advanced negotiation. So I didn't really think of it in that way, but when I compared them, it is very similar to motivational processes. Cognitive psychology, which was the same as the field world. And then I took lifespan human development, learning and cognition, social psychology, theories of personality, which is the same as their pondering personalities. I took abnormal psychology again because they said I had to. Industrial organizational psychology, which I do not recommend. And I took diversity and cultural factors in psychology, which is another fascinating class. Environmental psychology, which was probably the most boring class I had ever taken in my entire life, like ever. I was so glad when I went to my master's program and saw that that was not another class I had to take at a higher level. Psychological tests and measurements, which all that is like using the little tests to determine your personality type and things like that. Elements of clinical psychology, and then the capstone course is just all of it put together, and they just hit you with it all at once to see if you learned it all. So for the most part, they did have some of the classes that I took. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 out of the 12. So it's about half and half. And the rest of them, I'm not quite sure. Well, the Marvelous Mr. Maslow would have fit under many of these other ones, like it would fit under cognitive psychology as well as motivational processes. So the Sims stayed pretty close to a real psychology degree, and then they added in some fun ones or some fun sounding ones that really had no point. So that is my comparison of Discovery University's psychology program versus my real life psychology program. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was kind of an odd one to make. I'm kind of scared nobody's really going to want to watch this. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've ever thought to compare your real life degrees or whatever to the Sims ones, how did they compare? If you're new here and you like my content, please hit the subscribe button and leave me comments below. And I'll see you next video. Bye.